another motherfucking relay where we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, and now it's time for our continuation of what is our weekend recap in what was one of the more oversized weekends of fights we've had in a very long time. I mean, there really is a lot to cover, a lot to discuss, and a lot to reflect upon. So we're going to talk about Matchroom's card, particular to the card, the main event. We've already covered, the
undercard.
David Price versus David Allen, and Derek Chisora versus Artur Spilka. It's time to talk about Dillian Whyte versus Oscar Rivas. Now, I was right to pick Whyte to win on points, to win a decision. I felt that given what's on the line, how hard Dillian Whyte has worked to get to this point, he's not going to throw caution to the wind with Oscar Rivas. He's going to try to show some restraint, try to show some control. And, I felt that he was going to win a close points decision. But this fight was anything but close. I didn't figure that Dillian Whyte would go out there and exhibit the dominance behind the left hand that he did. I didn't figure that he would be able to effectively control Oscar Rivas as much as he did. And he did it all with the most basic, yet at the same time most important punch in boxing. Ladies and gentlemen, he did all this with the jab. You know that Dillian Whyte, he's known for a lot of things. He's known for being a game kind of fighter, a game rooster. That's what he's known for, a guy who's not afraid to get into a good tear-up. But what he's not known for is as a jabber. I mean, he's really not known for being a guy who consistently fights behind his left hand.
He's not.
Dillian Whyte is more associated with slobber knockers and dust-ups and Donnybrooks than he is to controlled fights that are fought cautiously and judiciously behind a jab. Whereas in this fight, that's very much the guy that showed up. The tactician, the strategist. It was a very mature performance from Dillian Whyte. Oh, granted, there were some interesting exchanges. There were moments where Dillian Whyte was going for it, ripping hard shots to Oscar Rivas' body, testing that guy's condition. A condition, by the way, that seems top-notch, because for all the punishment Oscar Rivas took, he never stopped trying, and he never looked hurt. He looked exhausted, breathing with his mouth open, marching forward, but what he never looked was hurt. You think about the gauntlet that Dillian Whyte put Oscar Rivas through as Oscar Rivas was attempting to march forward and make something happen. March forward, make something happen while covering up, as to not receive too much punishment coming through the front door. That if this guy, by some chance, manages to get around Dillian Whyte's jab or manages to power through it, Dillian Whyte would then fire sneaky uppercuts that would split the guard of Oscar Rivas. And these were uppercuts that he didn't seem to see coming. I mean, that's what denotes the sneakiness. That these were short uppercuts. They weren't loaded up. They weren't coming from all the way out there somewhere. Short uppercuts.
On the inside.
That would surprise Oscar Rivas as he entered into range. And if he wasn't getting nailed with uppercuts, he was getting nailed with hooks to the body. This very much was the battle of the body snatchers.
Body punches.
Funnily enough, I mentioned in my prediction video that in spite of Dillian Whyte being called the body snatcher, it did look like, at least in the last couple of fights, that Oscar Rivas was more of a body puncher than Dillian Whyte. Yet in this weekend's fight, the guy that was regularly going downstairs with heavy leather was Dillian Whyte. So he very much asserted himself as the body snatcher, that there may be two body punchers in this ring, but the only one of us worthy to be called the body snatcher is Dillian Whyte, earning the moniker. Dillian Whyte put on display a full boxing arsenal, from different varieties of punches to punch combinations to fighting on the front foot as the aggressor to fighting on the back foot as the defender, navigating the ring, picking his spots, taking his time. It was a more mature, if not one of the most mature, performances I've ever seen from Dillian Whyte. And I gather that if Dillian Whyte chose to be a little bit more economic and a little bit more careful in this situation as opposed to some others, it's because of what was at stake. It's because of what was on the line in this particular fight. That this fight, winning this fight, would see him become Deontay Wilder's mandatory challenger. Something that Dillian Whyte has been working towards for 600 fucking days?
Jesus.
He wasn't going to throw caution to the wind this time, not in this fight, not when that's on the line. So I was right to assume that Dillian Whyte would be a little bit more careful with Oscar Rivas than some others. But what I didn't imagine is that he would dominate him as such. He had that scare in the ninth. Let's talk about it. You know, Oscar Rivas, he gets within range and he looks to have landed what appeared to be an uppercut, a hard uppercut, that made Dillian Whyte hit the deck. And let's just be honest. I'm sure that many of you out there felt how I felt when Dillian Whyte hit the fucking deck. This fight might be over, you know? He might have been doing fan-fucking-tastic, but this is the heavyweight division. A knockout is always one punch away. And even if he gets up, who's to say he'll recover in time to get back in this fight? And that's very much what he did. Dillian Whyte didn't go out there and just show boxing skill. You know, that's surprising in and of itself, because Dillian Whyte is more associated with being a brawler than anything else. But he went out there and showed boxing skill, but not just boxing skill. True grit, true heart, true determination, that regardless of whether or not you think he can beat Deontay Wilder, he is very much determined to get to him. And it's for that reason he's earned his shot. So give it to the man. Let me tell you something. You got a lot of guys out there, right? They saw Dillian Whyte hit the deck, and what they tell themselves is, you know, we've seen Dillian Whyte hit the deck a couple of times. I mean, Parker almost had him. They see these things. They see that Oscar Rivas, in a fight that Dillian Whyte was mostly winning, they see that Oscar Rivas also managed to get Dillian Whyte down on the canvas. And they tell themselves that, well, look, you know, if Deontay Wilder, being the puncher that he is, if he lands clean on Whyte, that's all she wrote. To that, I'll say this. There's a precedence to have that kind of an opinion. I mean, there really is. There's a precedence to think that Deontay Wilder has everything it takes to beat Dillian Whyte. But regardless of your anecdotes and mine, which may be similar to yours, regardless of those anecdotes, Dillian Whyte feels that he can win the fight. And everything he has done for the past 600 days has been aimed towards getting that shot. So at minimum, you have to acknowledge that this is a fight that he really wants. He believes that he can win that fight, and he has earned his way. So give him his shot. That's all he's asking for. And if Wilder knocks him out, how you might think he knocks him out, or how I might think he knocks him out, if he does, fair play. But don't deprive the man of his opportunity. Maybe he beats that guy. Who really knows? It's the heavyweight division, and this is boxing. Anything can happen.
Yep, figured that out.
I'm not knocking anybody out there who thinks Deontay Wilder can beat Dillian Whyte. I am knocking the people who think it's okay to deprive Dillian Whyte of his shot. That's all I've been saying for the last couple of months, man. That's all I've been saying. Guy earned his way more so than some others, so give him a shot. You know, there's talk that we may see Dillian Whyte in action before he ever gets to throw a punch at Deontay Wilder, and I understand why. You know, the talk is that the deadline for Wilder to defend his title against Dillian Whyte would be from now until next May. That's a long duration of time, and Dillian Whyte cannot afford to be out of action for that duration of time. So I can understand if he keeps busy, but it better not be with some high-risk opponent. That's the bottom line. That he can have another fight, you know. Go ahead, keep the tool sharp, keep the machine oiled, but don't risk too much trying to stay busy, because you could lose it all from one wrong punch that gets through. If I have these things in mind, I have no doubts that Dillian Whyte has these things in mind. In today's heavyweight division that has been turned upside down by the massive upset loss of Anthony Joshua at the hands of Andy Ruiz, everybody has got to be handling themselves a little bit more carefully, having watched that unfold. So I don't think that the next time we see Dillian Whyte is going to be against some high-risk guy. We may see him again, maybe once, maybe even twice. May's a long way from now, you understand? So we might see the guy one, maybe even two more times before he has that shot at Wilder. But I'll say that given everything that's happened, I'm completely okay with Dillian Whyte taking on some lighter touches. I would actually be okay with that if he took a gimme fight as his next fight. He's earned that, and he's earned his shot. Congratulations to him. That's the most I can say. This is a fighter who has vastly improved from the first time I laid eyes on him, because the first time I laid eyes on him, what I saw was a brawler with good gamesmanship, not the best power, not the hardest guy to read, but that's not what he is today. He is more than that today. He has since improved into a fighter that can fight on both the front foot and the back foot. He can play the offensive, he can play the defensive. He can set up the traps, set up the sneaky punches to hit a guy with shots that he really doesn't see. He has shown the grit to pick himself up off the canvas when downed. Ladies and gentlemen, what more can you ask of this guy? At minimum, he's earned his shot. And I don't think there should be any doubts about that. You can have your doubts about who would win between him and Wilder. You can have your doubts about that. But you shouldn't have any doubts as to whether or not he earned a shot. Because he's clearly done that. Congratulations. We then move on to what was the preliminary card for the Manny Pacquiao versus Keith Thurman pay-per-view, a fight card that featured undefeated IBF super middleweight champion Caleb Plant against undefeated up-and-comer Mike Lee. And, you know, I said ahead of the fight, I see absolutely nothing in Mike Lee. God bless him. Nothing against him. It's not a slight at the fighters. But when I cross-compared the two, I said it quite plainly that I see absolutely nothing that Mike Lee brings to the table that should trouble Caleb Plant. And that's very much what we saw play out for a fight that lasted only, 3 rounds, you know? I mean, if there were any surprises, if there were any, you know, because I had Caleb Plant winning this thing. I had no doubts that Caleb would have his hand raised by the end of the fight. But I guess what was surprising is Caleb's power. We know how skillful this guy is. We know that he's one of the slicker boxers the division has to offer, that in terms of a balance of offense and defense, Caleb Plant is your guy. But I guess if there was something I didn't anticipate, it's how Caleb can hurt a guy. You know, because he was really hurting Mike Lee in there. How many times did he drop him? 2, 3 times? Something like that? I didn't figure he would dispatch him so quickly. In that way, Caleb exceeded my expectations, and I have to take stock that this guy might be a bigger puncher than I'm giving him credit for, because he dropped Uskateki and he dropped Mike Lee. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. So all things considered, you know, he did exceed my expectations, but I reiterate, I figured that Caleb was going to outclass Mike Lee. So the fight itself leaves me with very little to reflect upon. I knew Mike Lee don't belong nowhere near fucking Caleb Plant. Nowhere near him. It's a keep busy fight. It's a chance for Caleb to keep the tools sharp. But this is clearly a fight he's going to win. And that's what he did. Congratulations to him. I think, however, you know, moving on from that the first order of business for Caleb Plant has to be unification fights. I mean, it really has to be, because the super middleweight division is not a glamour division, you understand. It's not a division that everybody watches like welterweight, a middleweight, a heavyweight. If he really wants to establish himself as a major player in the sport of boxing, unification fights have to be the first order of business, because that's the only way he's going to make a big enough blip on the radar that other people are going to start to notice. Not just casual boxing fans, but, you know, people on the outskirts of that. Nevertheless, congratulations to him. We then move on to a fight that many people had mixed feelings about, and I don't blame them. You know, the stylistic matchup of this fight might have led people to believe that Omar Figueroa had what it would take to beat Yordenis Ugas, but for me, I wasn't convinced of that. I wasn't, and it appears that time has proven me right. I picked Ugas to win on points. Now, the aesthetic of the fight, you know, I wasn't quite clear how it would play out, how will Ugas negotiate the situation between a fighter who's trying to close the gap and fight in the phone booth. But I did know that I can't trust Omar, not in this situation, not with his sparse activity, these long hiatuses. It tells the story of a fighter who could be better, but right now isn't on the level. Let's talk about what we saw. You know, Omar Figueroa, characteristically, he's a pressure guy, so that's saying that his sweet spot really is mid-range to inside. That is where he is accustomed to operating, and he tried that in this fight, but what you might notice is that he was getting so far on the inside that he was collapsing the pocket, so much so that he's not just smothering Yordenis Ugas' work, he's depriving himself of the opportunity to dispense his own work out there, to get his own punches off, because he's so far on the inside. A lot of clinching, a lot of wrestling, a lot of going back and forth. You might wonder, why did this keep happening? And I'll tell you why. It's because Omar Figueroa, very early in the fight, realized
Ugas hits hard.
that one, he can't let Yordenis Ugas get full extension on his punches, because when he does, he generates very good power. We saw this as Ugas knocked Omar Figueroa into the ropes in the beginning of the fight, you understand. He caught him with a real big right hand that sent him reeling. So very early in the fight, Omar realizes he can't let Ugas get full extension on his punches, and mid-range, he can't afford to fight him there either, because mid-range, Ugas is ripping some hellacious hooks and uppercuts to Omar's midsection. So all Omar could do at this point to stop this guy from landing all these punches is to get so far on the inside that he can't move his fucking arms. But in the process of doing that, he deprived himself of his own opportunity to get off any punches. That's why these guys kept getting locked into a clinch and all tied up going back and forth, because it was really all Omar could do to stop Ugas from hitting him. And Yordenis Ugas being able to dictate the action from inside the pocket, that really is saying something. That really does speak to the level at which Omar is operating. You understand? That the whole time a pressure fighter like Omar is plowing forward, it's to get mid-range to inside, because that's his sweet spot, or it's supposed to be. Yet it was there that he absorbed the majority of the punishment. Upstairs, downstairs, hooks, uppercuts, holding, hitting, clinching, wrestling, you name it. And all of this happened not at the hands of a pressure fighter like Omar is, but at the hands of a defensively minded fighter. This is what I meant when I said that I don't think that Omar is operating on the same level as Ugas, because Ugas kind of beat him at his own game. You're trying to pressure this guy, but he just keeps peppering you with shots as soon as you get within range. And all you can do is get so fucking close to this guy that he's got no choice but to clinch you, because you look like you're going in for a couple of hugs. The most concise way to put it is that a pressure guy wants it to be a close quarters fight. They want it to be a fight that's fought within the phone booth, because that's where they do their best work. But what happens when the pressure guy is in the phone booth and he's getting worked? That, ladies and gentlemen, denotes a fighter who is being outclassed. I'll give Omar credit for being able to take that much punishment for such a long time. I mean, there were moments in this thing where I felt, they really should stop it. Omar's not going to make any adjustments. He's not going to win this fight. He obviously can't hurt Yordenis Ugas. He's not really getting off any effective punches. Nothing meaningful really happened for Omar Figueroa. There was nothing going his way. He's a tough kid for having hung in there as long as he did, but, it was a fight that could have, that maybe should have been stopped. You wonder if he didn't end up taking more punishment than he needed to in a fight that he was clearly on his way to losing, So the most I can say is Ugas lived up to my expectations and in some ways exceeded them, because I just didn't envision that he would be able to control Omar from a range where Omar's normally a decent fighter. He took that kid's he just gave him his first professional loss. Obviously, Ugas is going to move on to bigger and better things. By winning this fight, he aligns himself for a title shot. But for Omar Figueroa, there are some serious questions, some serious problems that need to be addressed and need to be corrected. That this guy needs tutelage. Something's got to change, because I don't see how much longer and how much better his boxing career can go, given how it's been going so far. Hopefully, he'll make the adjustments. It's one loss. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. But he's got to change something.
He has to.
He's got to change something soon.